The transport vessel Karzan's Pride shuddered violently as another explosion rocked its starboard hull. Emergency lights flickered in the cargo bay, casting crimson shadows across rusted metal walls. In the far corner, chained to a support beam, Skira wrapped her sleek violet-furred body around her 3 cubs, shielding them from falling debris. Her amber eyes tracked every sound, every tremor. The ship was dying. She could feel it in the way the gravity plates stuttered, in the acrid smell of burning circuitry that filled the recycled air. The Karzan slavers had abandoned them hours ago, fleeing in escape pods when the pirate attack began. They had left behind their cargo, 23 sentient beings, all chained, all forgotten. Skira's cubs mewled softly against her chest. They were barely 3 months old, their eyes still bright with innocent curiosity despite their circumstances. The smallest one, Tavi, pressed his tiny paws against her fur, purring in distress. She licked his forehead gently, her heart breaking. She had survived the Karzan markets, endured the cruelty of traffickers, all to keep her children alive. But now, chained to this dying ship, she could do nothing but wait for the void to claim them. The ship lurched again. Somewhere in the distance, metal groaned and tore. The other prisoners had long since gone silent, accepting their fate. Skira closed her eyes and began the death prayer of her people, the ancient words her mother had taught her beneath twin moons that she would never see again. Then she heard footsteps, heavy boots on metal decking, running. Skira's ears swiveled toward the sound. Her predatory instincts screamed danger. But what danger could be worse than what already awaited them? The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by the hiss of a cutting torch and a voice muttering in a language she didn't recognize. A figure emerged from the smoke, a human male, compact and lean, wearing a scorched engineering suit. His face was smudged with grease and soot, his brown hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. A toolkit hung from his belt, and he carried a plasma cutter in one hand. His eyes swept the cargo bay, widening as he took in the rows of chained prisoners. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. Evan Holt had been doing a routine salvage survey when he detected the distress beacon. The Karzan's Pride was supposed to be empty, already stripped by pirates. He'd come aboard looking for spare parts, maybe some viable fuel cells. He hadn't expected to find a floating prison. His handheld scanner had counted 23 life signs. The ship had maybe 15 minutes before its reactor went critical. The math was brutal and simple. He couldn't save them all. His own ship, the Wayfarer, had capacity for maybe 10, and that was pushing it. He'd have to choose. Then he saw her, the alien female in the corner, her fur shimmering like twilight, her body curled protectively around 3 tiny shapes. Her eyes met his across the bay, brilliant amber filled with desperate, fading hope. In that moment, Evan made his decision. He sprinted toward her. Skira tensed as the human approached, her claws extending instinctively. But he held up one hand in a gesture that transcended species, peace or perhaps apology. He knelt before her chains, his fingers already working the plasma cutter's controls. "It's okay," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I'm getting you out." She didn't understand his words, but she understood his intent. The cutter flared to life, and he began slicing through her restraints. The metal glowed orange, then white, then fell away in molten droplets. Skira gasped as the weight lifted from her limbs. For the first time in months, she was free. Evan moved to the cubs next, carefully cutting away their smaller chains. Tavi hissed at him, but Skira rumbled a calming sound deep in her chest. The human was helping. Somehow, impossibly, this stranger was saving them. "Come on," Evan urged, gesturing toward the exit. "We need to move now." He turned toward the other prisoners, his face twisting with anguish. A Thorian merchant, a pair of Valkyrie miners, a Centauran child, all watching him with varying expressions of hope and resignation. Evan's jaw clenched. His ship couldn't hold them all, but he'd be damned if he didn't try. Skira saw his hesitation. She understood. He was one being against impossible odds, trying to calculate who lived and who died. Her people had a saying, "Strength is nothing without honor." This human had honor. She could see it in every line of his body, in the way his hands trembled not from fear but from the weight of choice. She made a decision of her own. Skira gathered her cubs, then moved to the nearest prisoner, the Thorian. She extended a claw and sliced through a weak point in his chains that she'd observed during her captivity. The Thorian stumbled free, staring at her in shock. She moved to the next prisoner, then the next, her species' natural strength and razor-sharp claws making quick work of the weakened restraints. Evan caught on immediately. "You brilliant, beautiful genius," he breathed and joined her, using his cutter on the chains her claws couldn't break. They worked together, human and alien, freeing prisoner after prisoner. The ship screamed around them, bulkheads buckling, oxygen venting into space through a dozen hull breaches. Evan's wristcom blazed red with warnings. 10 minutes to reactor breach, then 8, then 5. "Everyone to the forward docking port!" Evan shouted, praying his universal translator was working. "Move, move, move!" They ran through tilting corridors, the freed prisoners helping each other, carrying the weak. Skira kept her cubs tucked against her chest, her powerful legs eating up distance. Evan led them through the dying ship, his engineering knowledge navigating the safest route through buckling infrastructure. The Wayfarer waited in the docking ring, her airlocks open like welcoming arms. It was a small ship, never meant for this many passengers, but Evan crammed them in anyway. The Velkari miners squeezed into the cargo hold. The Thorian wedged himself beside the engine compartment. The Centauran child found space in the galley. Skira was the last to board, her cubs still clutched protectively. She paused at the airlock, turning back to look at Evan. He was sealing the docking clamps, his fingers flying over the controls. The ship had minutes, maybe seconds. Their eyes met again. She saw no expectation of gratitude, no desire for recognition. Just determination, just humanity at its finest. Skira reached out and placed one paw on his shoulder, a gesture of respect among her people. Evan glanced up, surprised, then smiled wearily. "Get inside," he said. "Let's get you home." The Wayfarer tore away from the Karzan's pride with seconds to spare. Behind them, the slaver vessel erupted in a brilliant flash, scattering debris across the void. But aboard the cramped human ship, 23 souls breathed free air for the first time in months. In the co-pilot's seat, Skira held her cubs and watched the stars stream past. Beside her, Evan Holt plotted a course to the nearest coalition station, already composing the report that would expose the Karzan trafficking network. Neither spoke, they shared no common language yet. But in the quiet hum of the engine and the soft purring of sleeping cubs, they shared something more fundamental. The knowledge that when darkness falls, there will always be those who run toward it, torch in hand, refusing to let it win. That was humanity. That was hope. That was enough.